Doing Sandy Franklin's practice.
Yeah.
I could make it.
Well, Briggs Food, correct.
The May 31st, 2023 meeting of the Monroe County Compensation Policy Commission will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Britton.
Present.
Mr. Britton is present. Mr. Daniele.
Present.
Mr. Daniele is present. Mr. Dollinger.
Present.
Mr. Dollinger is present. Ms. Lyman Torres.
Present.
Ms. Lyman Torres is present. Mr. Moffett.
Present.
Mr. Moffett is present. Mr. Moyo.
Present.
Mr. Moyo is present. Ms. Whitfield.
Present.
Ms. Whitfield is present.
Our next agenda item is the approval of minutes, the minutes of the May 24th, 2023 meeting and Compensation Policy Commissioner in your folders. Without any objection, they will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of today. Our next item on our agenda is approval of a final report. We last meeting looked at, draft sections, kind of key sections of the report. Based upon that feedback and the direction of the commission, a final draft report was put together. It was circulated to committee members yesterday. There were minor, grammatical and different edits made, but not really impacting the substance of the report itself. That report is now before the commission for discussion, amendments, approval, et cetera. I think we kind of talked about at the last meeting process for going through this. First, we would take a motion to adopt the report. A second, we'll then open up discussion on the report itself, entertain any amendments, and then eventually have a final vote on the report as is or as amended by the commission. So with that said, do we have a motion to approve the report?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Lyman Torres.
Second,
Second.
we're approving for discussion, correct?
Yes,
Yes, yeah.
seconded by Mr. Daniele.
Before we jump, well, it actually relates to that. As I read the initial report from the law department, the date on the as of the date of May 22nd, we don't have to forward this report to the legislature until July 1st, correct?
Correct.
Is it our intention, if we approve it, to forward it to the legislature prior to July 1st?
I believe so.
Excuse me, turn my phone. There's no other way to say this. My concern is there's a date called June 27th. And that's a date that has a political implication for people who may vote on this proposal. And I just wonder whether we want to deliver the report prior to June 27th, just as a practical matter, practical political matter. I don't know. I have no strong feelings, but our obligation is to deliver it prior to July 1st. And I don't know how that affects the politics of either of the major political parties. And I just wonder whether there's any advantage in delaying the actual delivery of the report until the actual date of July 1st. I put that on the table. I have.
I think so. When at least how it's worked in the past, the reports are delivered. It's filed with the legislature. It's distributed to legislators, media, staff, etc. And then it takes a separate legislative action to actually put it on the agenda for the legislature. So, I think, yes, we don't have to deliver until July 1st, but also the legislature doesn't have to take it up in June. They're under
Right.
no
Well,
obligation to do.
the actual memo from the county attorney says that they don't have to act on it until just prior to November 7th, which seems to fit with a certain political calendar. And I just wonder whether we want to have a final report published. There's no other way to say this, prior to the primary. I don't know how that affects the politics of people who may be called to vote on this later I just raised that question for everybody. If the committee says we deliver it now, I'll go along with that. I just wanted to put that question before everybody.
But I mean, after this meeting, what we discussed, I mean, right now is open meeting and people can have this information today.
I don't dispute that. They probably already got it since we talked about this at the last session. The only question is, does it make any difference if we've actually forwarded the report to the county legislature prior to the primary? I don't know. There are primaries, I think on both sides, and I don't know how or to what extent this would impact anyone, and I'm not suggesting that it would or should, but I just think it's something we might consider. I leave that up to other voices.
I thought I had a sense that the legislature wanted to see this by the end of May, which is why we've done our work
Yeah.
so expeditiously in May.
Yeah, I think the initial directive from the president was to deliver by,
June
June 1, or I don't know if it was complete our work or deliver. I don't remember the exact terminology, but I know that was kind of our target date, which is why we kind of met on this accelerated.
I agree with that, and I'm not going to stand in the way if we file our report after today's meeting. I just thought I should raise that question for everybody.
Yeah, I guess, I don't disagree with you, and it's certainly a very valid and constructive opinion. But on the other end, much like the rest of our charge, we're supposed to keep politics out of it, and we're supposed to do our job, that we've been asked to do and deliver the report, I would imagine, in as soon as possible, or as soon as we feel we've completed our task. I wouldn't, at the same time, I wouldn't strongly object to waiting either. But, if the president asked us to do this, and if we could deliver it by June 1st or whatever the verbiage was, then, and if we're prepared to do so, I don't see, it's not really, to be honest, our problem what they do with it after that, right? Yeah.
I don't disagree with any of that
Yeah.
sentiment. I just thought I should put it on the.
Yeah, it's a fair statement. Yeah.
And Judge, I'm sitting here formulating a response to an inquiry if I had been running for office about a report that had been issued, but that hadn't been discussed yet in the legislature. And you can go all sorts of different ways with it, but our job, I think, here is just to make our recommendation. This will be available, I think. Is it?
It's already available.
It's already available. So,
Yeah,
so the questions are going to come up, and if it hasn't been discussed by the legislature, then there's all sorts of different avenues to walk your answer down. Maybe you do agree with it, maybe you don't agree with it, maybe it hasn't been discussed yet, and you're gonna, work with your colleagues to make it as good as it can possibly be. So,
Right, this doesn't bind anybody in the
course
legislature and leaves them lots of room. My concern is I just want to put on the table.
Sure.
It's important to discuss that.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm comfortable with that.
Discussion on the report itself, obviously. Anything in it, not in it, I imagine the recommendations would be kind of the bulk of any, substantive discussions on the dollar figures presented. Open it up for discussion for anyone.
I guess just a preview question. I'm assuming legal has reviewed this and finds it legal and appropriate, at least to the extent that we've
They've been,
gotten so far.
a lot of departments are copied on the drafts. They haven't been asked to offer an opinion on it, but I haven't received any, feedback
Yeah, I guess
to
I,
suggest otherwise.
yeah, I would suggest that, certainly we can move forward and do what we have to do today, but at some point before we deliver it, just some kind of a stamp of approval that at least in legal's opinion, we haven't done anything outside of our purview or contrary to the charter or anything that would make this a useless document.
Is it inappropriate in view of Mr. Daniela's question to ask the county attorney who's here whether he has any objection or any status? Is that part of our purview, or should we leave that alone?
I think we can ask the question. I just don't know if county attorney's had a chance to
Well,
review
I'm not gonna.
the
I'm not
document,
gonna
so I don't
buy
want to put him
into it. I'm not
on.
looking for his formal opinion. But if
Yeah.
something jumped off the page, it would be good to know.
Yeah, no, I I have not read it line for line. We will do that careful review, but yeah, this one you don't have.
Jack, I have just a couple quick things.
Sure.
That I wanted to question. In the principles discussion on page 1, we say it encourages incumbents to devote less than necessary effort. Do we really want to say that? Are we suggesting that incumbents are going to work without proper compensation or not working as hard as their newcomer members? I guess, given the sensitivity that I was once one of those incumbents, I just didn't think that that was part of the justification, that we're not differentiating between incumbents who were paid 18,000 and newcomers who were paid 18,000. I raise a question about that.
But when you were on the legislature, were there some of your colleagues who weren't putting in that much effort?
That had to do with whether they were going to be seriously challenged in the next election. I think that's
Right.
the fair comment, whether they were incumbents or not, they were looking over their shoulders. In some parties at a potential primary and in others about a viable candidate from the opposite party. It was really a factor of, at least in my experience, you worked hard when you thought the job you really liked was in jeopardy. I'd be willing to take another member's view of that.
From my point of view, this was a more diplomatic way of talking about something. For instance, some state legislatures in the country pay their legislators like under $100 a year. And if you're a cynic, you might think, well, what are they looking forward to in the future? And so it's just to make sure that that people are well compensated and are doing the job that they're meant to do. If you know what I'm saying.
I get that, but
I don't particularly mind the offense. I mean, I understand the offense, that it could be offensive, but I don't mind it.
And I think there's a notion that it's public service and, compensation should motivate, but
Mhm.
these are also, real people living in a real
get that.
world and, compensate to say compensation is not a motivating factor, I think is somewhat naive in a sentence.
all right, I just wanted to raise that. If it stays in there, I'm not going to do it. Two quick things just following up, and I apologize. I was on vacation and out and I didn't get to read this until this morning, but just a couple quick definitions. We use CPIU, which is the Consumer Price Index for urban communities. We ought to identify it when we use the abbreviation. We also ought to identify it when we use the CAGR, which is the other.
I think it's in a footnote.
Is it defined? I didn't see where it was defined. It's used, but I didn't see where it was defined. Did I miss that, Paul?
I had it in footnote 5, compounded annual growth rate, CAGR, based on year of last salary adjustment. That was on page 5, footnote 5.
Okay, that's fine, but
But so noted on the CPIU.
yeah, the
And we can add
CPI,
a
just to
footnote to that
clarify.
effect. I don't think we need to.
Right.
address that.
I would just add that footnote.
Yeah, that's fine.
The only other factor, we mentioned salaries elsewhere. We talk about the mayor's salary. Should we include a reference to the fact that both in the town of Greason and the town of Pittsford, their supervisors are paid more than the county executive? Just to create a certain equivalence between the fact that the mayor is paid more than the county executive, and so are executives in suburban communities as well. I believe the numbers were that the supervisors in Pittsford and Greece make more than $120,000.
I have no objection.
I think
I
that's
support
that's a
that.
valid amendment.
I support that.
Sure. Other than that, I have no further comment. Oh, just one other, I apologize. One other thing, in considering the principles that are at stake. We don't mention the fact that the last time the county legislature and the county executive salaries were established, the county budget, I believe, was less than $300 million. And so the scope of the responsibilities have, for both the legislature and the executive, have substantially expanded now that the budget is 1.1 billion. I don't know if somebody in the room has that number, but 1.3 billion. It's a lot of money. It's a significantly bigger enterprise than when we were paying our legislators and our county executive. And I think that, I don't know, I think we ought to put the numbers in and show the scope of what the county's responsible for now. If I missed it in the report,
Didn't see that.
You did not.
I just think it's another important factor in why we're compensating people more for a company, an entity that is a quarter the size of its current size when we last raised the legislative salaries. It's a bigger job. So there's to it.
Yeah, I can add, as long as the commission is okay with just adding,
Paragraph under
paragraph under 3 that,
further analysis, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I'm in agreement with
I
that.
support.
Any-
I support.
Any objections? All right.
Other than that, those are my comments. Let me add to the chair of the commission, as well as the members of the staff. Well put together, well done. We've really had wonderful staff work, so I appreciate the work of everybody in the room.
Great, thank you.
I agree.
Agreed.
Any other discussion? Paul?
Well, I just wanted to run through the chief's salaries here. I don't think at our last meeting, we had come to an exact consensus on what these figures would be.
Mhm.
But for the county executive, I had in my mind that it would be about 180,000. And so I'm good with that. That represents a 50% increase, which in my mind is still insufficient considering the scope of the responsibilities and comparable salaries in the community. But I think 180 is fine. The sheriff's salary, I won't discuss because that had already been increased not that long ago. The county legislator salaries are showing up by more than 50%. I didn't do the calculation, but it's, I think, probably closer to 60%. That seems appropriate to me as well. The county clerk is here slated for a smaller percentage increase, and I wonder if we ought to consider a higher figure. If the county executive is getting 50% increase, then shouldn't the county clerk get at least a 1/3, 33% increase? I would support raising that figure to say 122.
That would be 50%, wouldn't it?
That would, no, I think that would still be,
Right now, it's at about 42%.
Yeah, it's a
is
40%
how my math
raise, yeah.
comes out.
oh, you're right, Mark. You're right, Mark.
When,
I was a liberal arts major.
no problem. When I looked at these, and I'll keep my comments quite short, they're in the ballpark of precisely what I thought was fair, kind of taking in all the other, and especially the county clerk, which Paul was talking about. Our peer counties, it seems to be kind of right in that ballpark, and I guess not to legitimize those, because I don't know the last time that those were raised, and again, we're kind of just working off of data that is imperfect. So these numbers are acceptable to my mind and my analysis of what we've been dealing with here. And I just want to compliment the rest of the commission. I think this was actually very fruitful discussions and very collegial. So I thank you all for your participation, and especially to the staff. So thank you very much.
I think to the point about the county clerk and not to trivialize the importance or the duties of the position, but when you look and when we talk about some of the principles and where the growth in county operations has happened, a lot of that has more happened in the areas where an executive has oversight, and certainly in kind of the sheriff's office and some of the other areas where, because so much of what the county clerk's function is driven by, state law, there hasn't been really as large of expansions and powers, duties, and scale of that office as there has been in some of the others. And I think that, while again, not trivializing the importance of the position, that's why you see somewhat of a lesser adjustment, versus the county executive.
I think just one other thing, and I'll just toss it. I agree with both the salaries that are listed for the sheriff and for the county executive. I think those are fair. The other thing that I would do is just add to Jack's comment. The level of discretion that the county clerk has is significantly less than that of the county executive because of the scope of the services, the increase in the federal money, the social service money, all the other aspects that go with it. The clerk's job, while significant and vital in many areas, is really dictated by state law, and really I'm just trying to think, there's a little more work in the pistol permit area and maybe in a couple of other areas, but for the most part the clerk's job remains largely administrative rather than discretionary under those circumstances. And Paul, we sort of talked about this. $5,000 one way or the other doesn't make really a big difference to me. But I think the 115 is, which is the recommended number, is fair at this point. And it really ties back to the other question that, in my opinion, is just as important as what salaries we set, which is a commitment to take another look at these salaries 4 years from now, so we don't run into a hole like we have this time around. So we have a better, we can keep them up to date better, especially in a period of high inflation, if we end up with an extended period of high inflation. So I'm willing to accept the 115 number. I understand Paul's point, but I just think that's a fair kick up for the interim, and then we wait and see what it looks like 4 years from now.
Any other discussion, comments?
About that topic or as a whole?
The topic or as a whole?
I think that, we've all discussed that these are even lower than we think the market would bear, but that these are reasonable, recommendations that we hope are accepted. It has, been a pleasure to discuss with the members of this commission, the very thoughtful review that the members of this commission have undertaken, and really appreciate all the work of the staff in preparing the information and doing the field work to get that information to us in a timely manner so that we can meet our charge. But ultimately, just wanting to say that, as taxpayers, what we budget for is what we value. And we need to ensure that we value these key leadership roles that have such important, impacts on our quality of life as residents of this community. And we're hopeful that what we do put forward is adopted, including the policy changes to continue to look at this going forward, so that our leadership can focus on the critical needs of our community and not be distracted with the inadequate compensation, which can cause a lot of issues, including attracting and retaining people who don't have the highest level of skill and experience, which is what our residents both need and deserve. So I'm in support of what is before us in this draft, and hope my colleagues will join in on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'll, without going into it, ditto. Well said, and I agree 100%. I'm satisfied with the work and numbers that we've put together. Thank you to the chair and to the staff. And I am hopeful that the elected officials who are ultimately going to review and take action on these recommendations have the will to do so, and that the public is accepting of the fact that, these are while significant increases over current pay, but, grossly under elevated from where, competitive elected officials in other areas, other towns, and other jobs that have similar responsibilities are paid. So I'm happy with the work we've done, and thank you all for your work.
But I think, that was part of, in including kind of the historical growth rates here. I think a lot of people are going to look at like, oh, it's a 50% raise, it's a 40% raise, it's 60, but when you look at when these salaries were last adjusted and what these increases really are, and I think there's very few people that would stay in a private sector job if this is all their salary had increased, and obviously these increases haven't happened in 20 or 30 years in some instances. So I think, well, I'm sure a lot of attention will be drawn to the delta itself that it's moving. The time is an important aspect, and certainly not something that's lost on this by the members of this commission, but hopefully continues as this document enters its next phase. Ms. Whitfield, I want to be mindful of you. Any comments or any discussion you want to add?
Yes, just a few comments. I won't take up a lot of everyone's time. First and foremost, it's been a pleasure to work with you. I appreciate the opportunity to participate virtually. Second, I am with all of our proposed recommendations. I think they are very strong and in line with a sustainable structure moving forward. And thank you to all of the staff for all of their hard work as well.
Thank you. So
Before,
Yeah.
I just want to offer one. I've put this opinion forward before, but I just want to add, and I agree with the comment from Danielle and Anthony. But it's my hope that during the process of legislative review, it's not picked apart, that this is a package. This represents a compromise, I think, among the members of the commission on all of these salaries, fully aware of the fact that they're elected positions. Those elected positions can change. We're not doing this to favor any current incumbent who holds the job. We believe these are reasonable rates of pay for the people who, and Danielle said it perfectly, this is a message to our community about the value that we assign to these elected roles. And it would just seem to me that to pick it apart and accept it as anything less than a package would be unfortunate. And it's really a compromise, I think, across the board, all of us knowing who the players are, what the politics are, what the mood of the community is. And I think this commission has done a very good job in balancing all of those factors. So I'll move the question if you need it moved. This is on the actual recommendation on the salaries.
This would be on recommendations for elected positions, legislative leadership positions.
I'll move that question.
And we state explicitly to add, is that what you're saying?
To your,
No, here's.
We can't bind them, but our
Right.
recommendation.
yeah, and I think I was going to point out kind of towards the end, but I mentioned in the email, and you'll see at the kind of the end, there's an appendix for members to put in, comments. And obviously, like in a local law, you'd have like a legislative intent section. We don't really have that here, but I think if there's something that, commission, and no, if it's not a requirement whatsoever, but there's, comments that commission members want to convey.
Sure.
I think that's a great place to do it in that way.
I provided some,
Yeah.
encourage you to do so.
Yeah, and I'll second the motion.
Yeah,
The question. All right, all those in favor, so this isn't adopting, this is just moving to adoption, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then we have the main motion, which is that the Compensation Policy Commission hereby recommends the above detailed salary schedule, which is the salaries listed on page 5 for elected positions and page 6 for legislative leadership positions. Be adopted by the county legislature and enacted by the county executive. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Resolution carries. Our next items are 2 policy proposals, which were circulated at our last meeting. pared down from the original four, just based on the discussions of the commission. The first policy proposal is to remove the clerk of the legislature from consideration by the Compensation Policy Commission. The second is adding that to the charter that the commission convene every 4 years or by resolution of the legislature. So again, it doesn't remove the legislature's ability to convene the commission, but it does require it to convene at least every 4 years.
I'll move the first policy proposal with respect to the clerk of the legislature.
I'll second that.
Any additional discussion?
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
of the- Perhaps of the county attorney. Does the county legislature have the ability to amend the charter without any approvals other than the county, I assume the county executives, right? It becomes like a local law,
Correct. It's a local law.
no need for referendum or anything like that. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on policy proposal number one? Seeing none, all those in favor of recommending this proposal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Proposal carries. Moving on to policy proposal number two, again, this is the addition to have the commission convene every 4 years. Any or I guess we'll take a motion to approve this policy.
I'll move that too.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Torres. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Policy is hereby recommended. That concludes our agenda item as far as approving a report. Are there any other matters or discussions to become before the committee?
I guess I would ask that the chair or through the leadership in the legislature and legislative offices, if we could be notified when this is going to be heard in a public hearing in the county legislature. I may want to attend, and I would imagine some other members of the commission may want to attend as well.
That's a great idea.
That's correct.
So if we could be notified of that process and the public hearing specifically.
Does this go through the charter committee or the rules committee? Who, is there a committee assignment that would start this process?
I think it's at discretion of the president. I don't know how past, I think in the past, because of timing, they've bypassed the committee process and gone straight to the floor. Of the
It's a matter of
legislature
urgency.
As a matter of urgency, but I imagine if it went.
Of course, it's
through
urgent.
Committees, it would probably.
Agenda charter.
There ain't-
Ways and means.
Yeah, ways and means for sure.
Yeah. But I think, again, not knowing exactly the timelines of the last 30 years when these commissions met, ours is a little more forgiving probably than others in the past as far as the timing for implementation.
Jack, I just want to offer one other viewpoint that really doesn't affect our work here, but by increasing these salaries, it seems to me we pave the way for the legislature to make sure that those who are working in the legislative staff are paid reasonable wages as well. I'm familiar enough to know, despite the applause, the quiet applause from some in the audience. But it's just, I think we realize, as this report reflects, that it's the staff that does a huge amount of the work that prepares the legislature to make informed votes. And it just seems to me I hope that perhaps one of the consequences of this is the legislature will look at those who are doing the work in the trenches and make sure that they're paid reasonable, livable wages that are commensurate with their skills. So it's just a hope.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn with one caveat, and that is to express my thanks to the chair for his work and thank you. You're here.
Yeah, we'll all second that.
Seconded by everyone.
Second by everybody.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The May 31st, 2023 meeting of the Monroe
Can
County.
I have one more vote that everybody haven't known it before they leave, please? I got-
Compensation.